The true horrors of medieval plague doctors explained. The bird-like mask, the long black cloak, the eerie figure moving slowly through streets filled with death. We all know this image, the plague doctor. But behind that strange mask lies a story far more horrifying than most people realize. These weren't heroic saviors who bravely fought the Black Death. They were a mix of desperate men, failed healers, and unlucky souls caught in one of history's darkest nightmares. And today, we're going to uncover the true horrors of medieval plague doctors, their terrifying costumes, the gruesome treatments they carried out, and why their very presence was a sign that hope had already run out. Close your eyes and picture Europe in the mid-1300s. The air is heavy with smoke from burning incense, meant to drive away evil. Church bells toll endlessly, not for ceremonies but for death after death after death. Streets overflow with carts piled high with bodies. Families lock their doors and shutter their windows, praying that the sickness won't reach them. This was the time of the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in human history. Between 1347 and 1351, it wiped out nearly 50 million people, almost half the population of Europe. No one knew why it was happening. Some said it was God's punishment for sin. Others blamed poisonous air, bad smells, or even the stars themselves. In this world of fear and ignorance, cities turned to a strange and unsettling figure. The plague doctor. When you hear the word doctor, you might imagine an expert healer, someone trained for years in medicine. But plague doctors were something else entirely. Most were not skilled physicians at all. Many were young medical students with no real experience. Others were failed doctors who couldn't find other work. And sometimes they weren't doctors at all, just men hired by towns out of sheer desperation. Cities paid plague doctors to serve during outbreaks. Their job wasn't only to treat the sick, it was to record deaths, write wills for the dying, and report how fast the plague was spreading. In many cases, they were less like healers and more like accountants of death. And yet, in the public imagination, they became mysterious, almost supernatural figures, walking reminders of both hope and despair. The most haunting image of the plague doctor is their outfit. That long black robe, the wide-brimmed hat, and, of course, the mask with its long, curved beak. Why did they wear this? At the time, people believed in the theory of miasma, the idea that disease spread through poisonous air, full of bad smells. To protect themselves, plague doctors stuffed the beak of their masks with herbs, spices, and flowers. Mint, lavender, cloves, even vinegar-soaked sponges were placed inside, so that every breath was filtered through what they thought was a protective shield. The rest of the costume was just as strange. Heavy leather gloves, a waxed leather cloak, a wooden stick used to point at patients, examine wounds from a distance, or push people aside without touching them. To the people of medieval Europe, this costume was both terrifying and otherworldly. Imagine already being half dead with plague fever, and then seeing a masked, bird-headed figure looming over you with a knife to lance your swollen sores. What's even worse is that the costume didn't actually stop the disease. While the leather may have offered a bit of protection from fleas and direct contact, the doctors still worked in close quarters with the sick and dying. The mask might have kept out bad smells, but it did nothing to stop the true cause of plague, the bacteria carried by fleas and rats. So what exactly did plague doctors do? Most of their treatments were based on superstition and old medical theories, not real science, and many of them were painful, sometimes deadly. They practiced bloodletting, cutting veins open to release the bad humors. They lanced open the painful buboes, the swollen lumps that appeared on victims' necks, armpits, and groins, then smeared them with strange mixtures of herbs, mercury, or even ground emeralds. Some treatments sound bizarre today. Patients were told to drink potions made from crushed snakes, or even swallow powdered gems. Others were instructed to carry sweet-smelling flowers, or to inhale smoke from burning herbs. One remedy was to apply a live chicken to the sores, believing the bird would draw out the poison. These so-called cures almost never worked, but plague doctors continued them because they had nothing else to offer. Here's something surprising. Plague doctors weren't always trusted or admired. In fact, many people feared them just as much as the disease itself. Rumors spread that plague doctors were spreading the sickness instead of curing it. Some believed the beak wasn't filled with herbs, but with poison. Others whispered that doctors were agents of death, marking families for quarantine and sealing their fate. In many towns, their arrival was a death sentence. If a plague doctor visited your street, it meant the authorities had already accepted that people there would die. To see one standing at your door was to feel your last hope slip away, and sometimes their presence truly did make things worse. By lancing sores or performing bloody procedures without sterilization, they often spread the infection further. What must it have been like to wear that mask, to walk through streets lined with corpses day after day? Most plague doctors were young men, terrified but trapped by contracts. Cities promised them money, sometimes large sums, but often in advance, because everyone knew many wouldn't live long enough to collect their pay. Some wore religious charms, convinced they were fighting not just disease but demonic forces. Others resigned themselves to fate, accepting that their job was essentially a death sentence. For many, being a plague doctor wasn't an act of heroism, it was a mixture of desperation and necessity. They weren't saviors. They were survivors, trying to make sense of an incomprehensible disaster. History gives us glimpses of real plague doctors and the horrors they witnessed. In Florence, plague doctors described entire households sealed inside their homes, rotting away together while the city guarded the doors from outside. In Paris, records show doctors writing down wills as families coughed blood beside them, too weak to speak. Some, like the famous Nostradamus, worked as plague doctors before gaining fame for prophecy. Unlike others, he rejected bloodletting and instead encouraged hygiene, clean water, and fresh air advice that probably saved lives. But for every Nostradamus, there were countless nameless doctors who died quickly, leaving only brief mentions in city records. The image of the plague doctor outlived the plague itself. Long after the Black Death ended, the costume became a symbol of fear and mystery. In Venice, the bird mask was even turned into a carnival costume, a twisted echo of its terrifying origins. Today, it appears in horror movies, Halloween costumes, and artwork. But when we see it, we should remember what it truly represented. Not science, not healing, but fear, superstition, and death. So what is the truth about plague doctors? They weren't miracle workers. They weren't evil sorcerers. They were men caught between ignorance and terror, trying to protect themselves while surrounded by unimaginable suffering. The real horror of plague doctors isn't the mask. It's the reminder that in the face of one of history's deadliest plagues, humanity was helpless, clinging to strange rituals and desperate measures. The next time you see that eerie beaked mask, remember, behind it wasn't a savior. It was a frightened man breathing through herbs and leather, walking through a world that was dying. If this story gave you chills, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more dark history, and share it with someone who thinks the plague doctor mask looks cool, because now you know the truth. What other terrifying mysteries of history should we cover? Let me know in the comments below.